Now it's time for discussion, questions and answers, and let me ask any questions. Who wants to start? Okay. I have some questions. Let me start from the, my question to Professor Kirumian about the importance of the memoirs and diaries. You know, in Armenian genocide issue, for years we have the situation then memoirs of Armenian genocide survivors were neglected, but at the same time, for example, memoirs of perpetrators were highly used in scientific research. What do you think about this? Do we see that this situation is changing, or we have the same negligence to the Armenian sources or Armenian memoirs?
Okay, it's for sure right that the perpetrator was using every source they could with the made-up memoirs like that of Talyat Pasha or Cemal Pasha or others, but we were not using it. Garnik Panyan's, like, for instance, I'm going to use Garnik Panyan's memoir that was just translated into English 2-3 years ago. Nobody looked at it to see what was happening in Antura. And they were praising Cemal Pasha and Halide Adib for their humanitarian work they were doing in this orphanage. But Garnik Pasha and others that we see, we start unearthing all these things. We see what was going on in that specific orphanage and how dehumanizing, to use the same word that has been used a few times in this discussion, was the treatment of Armenian orphans in that orphanage. And coming back to your question, yes, we are using the memoirs now, and the historians. I have seen many Armenian historians in their recent publications, in their recent discussions using memoirs that have been neglected so far. So we are coming to our senses to know that memoirs are not, and negative treatment of the memoirs was not coming from the Armenian historians from the beginning. It was something, a propaganda of the Turks saying that, well, yeah, such and such wrote their memoirs, but you cannot see it as a source because, well, they had forgotten. They have beautified what their individualized their memoirs, and this is what it happens. So I will stop here. I hope I answered your question.
I would like to ask to Rubina. Rubina, I would like to know, you studied a lot these memoirs. In what decades were written the majority of these memoirs? At the beginning, when the genocide, the survivor, or after many years, according to your study? When is the moment where these memoirs are more? Do you understand me what I mean?
Yes, come to importance. These memoirs come to importance and people start looking at it. That's a very good question. I said that many people wrote their memoirs, manuscripts in Armenian or diaries in Armenian, but they did not touch them, they did not share them because the world was not ready to listen to them. It was the same with the Holocaust also. It was in the 1960s that the Jews started looking into the memoirs, into what happened in Israel. I mean, in Israel, they started looking into this memoir happening, what had happened to European Jewry. The same with Armenians. The sons and daughters of these people, the survivors, tried to neglect, to kind of forget about the past. There were so many instances that the daughter or the son would say, "Mom, Dad, don't talk about this. Let's forget about this. This is a new world. We have to build up our lives in this new world." They were not encouraged. Then there was this movement, I would say this movement in the United States and elsewhere, going back to their roots. Maybe we took the example of the African Americans, even the Latinos in United States, who went to their roots, who started, who started digging up their ancestors. And when the Armenians, taking the example of these people, started looking for their roots, they found out about the genocide, what happened to their mothers. And they started creating them. Manuscript was, they started looking into these manuscripts and sometimes published 1960s on, we have had an emergence of these memoirs, but it is just lately that we're using it in historiography. Suren, I'm done.
Probably the connection is not stable.
There's a pause in our discussion.
Can I ask?
No, it's not. It comes into my. Yeah, if I hear you, is.
Sorry. Yes, I wasn't.
Everybody is mute.
Yes, we hear you.
I have one question, if I may.
Okay,
Yes,
it's
please.
on.
Thank you so much for your presentations, all of you. And I have a question to Dr. Rubina Pirumian. I just wonder, is there any statistics regarding the gender of memoirs? Who wrote them, mainly women or men? Because I think there is also a psychological aspect of writing memoirs, and maybe men could be ashamed much more than women, to my mind, to write that kind of memoirs. So if you know something or any statistics regarding this, thank you.
Yeah, I cannot give you statistics, but my impression is that that men survivors wrote their memoirs more than women did. Why this happened? There are many reasons why they really did that. It was afterwards that women started writing, were encouraged writing their memoirs. Maybe women were more intimidated in the families, even in the diaspora or in the New World. They were more intimidated. They had more duties in the families and couldn't get to do this. And you right, reading the memoir of a man, you cannot see the suffering of the female survivor. It's written from the perspective of a man, and there is some individualization in those memoirs. But women are not falling behind. They are also writing the memoirs. And I see this in the second generation. In the second generation, daughters are more likely to prod their parents and tell their stories. And there was the first generation, the shortage of female writers of their memoirs is being remedied by the second generation, daughters of the second generation, the daughters of the survivors writing the memoirs of their parents.
Thank you, Carola. Please, your question.
Thank you very much, Professor Peroumian, for your presentation. Now I have very little insight into the field of research that you're doing, and out of curiosity, where do you find those memoirs? Are they published, or are they in archives? How do you get hold of them?
Many of them are published right now. Many of them are published, but I've also looked into unpublished materials. When I see someone in a study mentioning a name, a survivor, I go start looking into his biography to see if he or she has ever written something down, and I trace it. I start looking into it. And I'm a very avid reader, so I read a lot.
Thank you. And I just to add
and
something.
If you
to add something,
take my
yes.
applications, just wanted, yeah.
Yes, please.
Just wanted to add that if you look at publication, if you look into my publication, you can see so many materials that I have used, and the sources are there, how I used it, where I got it from.
You know, in
Yes.
Armenian Genocide Museum, we have hundreds of videotyped and audio-typed memoirs of survivors, interviews with survivors of Armenian Genocide. But you know, majority of them are not how to say, to transcript it. Yes, if I am using the word rightly?
They're not
and where we started
transcribed
this year. We started this project to transcript all of these memoirs in our museum, and I know that the same work is done in University of Southern California, in Shoah Foundation, and Armenian memoirs. About 800, if I'm not mistaken, they are working on transcription of these materials. And you know, it's interesting, but after 100 years, we will have so many new stuff, new material for research, so many things we never met in our research materials. And yes, you can find some of these transcriptions in Shoah Foundation website.
I want to add about the Shoah Foundation.
Yes.
I want to add, yes, the Shoah Foundation Eyewitness website was one of my sources that I used. You can just type any, like what I did for my research, like surviving, like insurgents, like child kidnapping, keywords. You just can type keywords into it and bring, and in Armenian genocide, it'll bring the testimonies that include items of, descriptions of such keywords items. And it's very easy to go into it and do research. Nowadays, everything is very easy. You don't need to get the book and read it. And I have done about 15 interviews myself. And it is really revealing how people say into the microphone the things that they have never shared with their relatives. It's easier for them to kind of confess to anything, to the shame that they have felt, to the suffering that they have experienced.
Thank you. Any questions? My next question to Professor Lingas. Usually I think when we use these labels to other nations, sometimes it's normal. Yes, sometimes even if we don't have intention to kill these people, or to organize, and of course to organize genocide, we have such archetypal maybe labels or nicknames related to different nations. For example, Armenians have some things with Russians, with Georgians, with neighbors, usually with neighbors, yes, with whom we competing, we are in eternal competition. But my question is, what do you think? Where is this threshold when it becomes dangerous? What is this limit which can be identified as warning sign for genocide or this?
Thank you very much for a very good question. To be honest, being a lawyer, of course, often one just looks at the situation as it was and tries to apply the law onto it, rather than, probably that's also a bit more the position that Regine has, that you try to prevent and to foresee atrocities before they actually happen. And that's also where your question is heading. And yes, I think there is, one thing is the labeling of a group or a group of people or nicknames. You have to look at Trump, and he has used a lot of very negative, dehumanizing rhetorics regarding the Mexicans. He called them rapists. There was, what was it, the dogs. There were also very negatively loaded terms there. And I don't think people were talking about an imminent threat of genocide. Obviously not, because there have to be more elements present. The dehumanization is one of those elements that is an indicator of how you position yourself versus the other group. And of course, and I think what is even more prominent as an element is this threat thought, that the other group is threatening your own group and the well-being and the continuation of the existence of your group. And I think once you add up the different elements, that's when it becomes dangerous. But the nicknames in itself, no, but it is about positioning, and it's about removing the humaneness of a certain group.
Thank you. And your question to Nelida, yes?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I was fascinated by the presentation of how the children were integrated or not into the different societies. And what is strange is from what shall I say, because the logic doesn't quite function, because they kill the parents, but then the children are integrated as like normal children into other households with the belief that they will just adapt and become normal. And that also happened, for example, here in Norway. I'm not Norwegian, I'm Swiss, but a big part of the history of Norway was the Sami, the indigenous Sami population that was Norwegianized. They were put into orphanages, placed into real Norwegian families, and they hoped that they would just put to stop it. But what is surprising is the logic doesn't really work out, because I mean, you carry the DNA of your parents. And in a way, the perpetrators don't seem to see that. They seem to have the belief that with re-education or integration into for example, a standard Argentinian family, you will just erase all of the past of that child.
Yeah. Yes, that happened in the Argentine case, because these baby, they were babies in general, not from babies. They used to take this baby and raise with like a member of their family. This, but it's very important in Argentina that there is a right to know the identity. And then there is a group, there's Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, that have many lawyers that help to the people who have doubt about their identity. It's a subject very clear now in Argentine society. For instance, I told that there is approximately 400 babies that were taken, but now approximately we have 125 that now they go back to their family. They pass for the analysis of the blood. I don't know, ADN, in English, I don't remember how to say. Then they realize that they are members of another family, not this family. Now it's incredible when I am talking, but this situation is normalized now, because there is a possibility of these children to come to go to their real family. For one side, and the other side, the tribunal in Argentina were very good in this case, because all the criminal, this military that took this baby are in jail. All of them are in jail or died. But this situation, I can tell you, is normal, but we as a society, we feel that the real criminal are condemned not only by the tribunal, but the society at all the society. I don't know if I could answer to your question, but the thing is, from these 400 babies, now these people have is 40 years old. 125, they could know who is his real family, and they are with this family again. For instance, this is the case of Stella de Carlotto, who is grandchildren. He could recuperate this boy that now is 40 years old approximately. This situation is, there is the law is acting very well, and this association that is Abuela de Plaza de Mayo, that helps in all psychologically to these people to try to, it's very difficult, but to try to have a normal life in his real family.
Suren, I'd like to react to Regina's
yes, sure.
presentation.
Yes, please.
Yeah, this was quite new for me. I had a very superficial knowledge about Rohingya, and your perspective, comparative study of Rohingya, what is going on in there, and the Armenian was quite fascinating. And I always appreciate the comparative study of events, because there are lessons that we don't learn, but there are many many aspects that clarifies very well. So I thank you very much. And to Professor Langas, a minor point in your presentation that caught my eye, you were referring to he as the perpetrators. But in Armenian genocide, at least, there were she perpetrators, a lot of them. And I think at top of the list, I would say Halide Adib, who is appreciated and who is praised as the feminist, the woman, the Turkish woman feminist, the humanitarian, and he was not. Just if you read anything about Antura, you will see that. And then the minor perpetrators who did everything to finish up the crime that men did against Armenians. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Yes, and in Cambodia, so many women perpetrators in Cambodian camps, and so yes. But of course, we usually identify perpetrator with men, and it's traditional. I mean, traditional, yes, perception maybe wrong,
With the
but
leader, yes.
yeah. And the next question. Carola, you had to Regina, yes?
Regina, do you first want to reply to Rubina's comment?
Yes.
I was just gonna say thank you. I appreciate that. It's always very, I think it's always a very sensitive thing because sometimes some survivor groups don't want to hear that people are going through a shared experience, and really you can have a unique experience and nobody needs to take it away, but there is still a shared experience going on among many victim groups around the world. So thank you.
I have to react to this. I cannot hold on because I had that same experience when I was writing my dissertation, a comparison of the Jewish Holocaust survivors, their responses, and Armenian survivors. My Jewish advisor, my professor, said there is nothing to compare to Jewish Holocaust is unique. And there are still many scholars that think that Jewish Holocaust is unique. But in their uniqueness, there are so many commonalities with other genocides. So I thank you for raising that point.
Thank you.
Yes, any questions? Yes, please. Yes, Carola.
Thank you very much. I did, when I said he, the perpetrator, in a quick bracket mentioned that I am fully aware that there are female perpetrators too. And there's just been a recent article about female perpetrators during the Holocaust, which are completely sidelined historically, although they were there as well, but nobody talks about them. So yes, I am fully aware that there are female perpetrators, and the majority of the known cases are male, but the female also had a very important role, absolutely, even in Rwanda or in the Yugoslav case. No, Regina, a super interesting presentation. I kept on making notes because I wanted to ask you some things. I was wondering, do you have, it seems you have insight into the truth commissions in different contexts. Did they look at the similar points of discussion that you had? Like, for example, is dehumanization an issue? Is propaganda an issue? Is nationalism an issue that they really discuss in those reports?
You mean the which ones, like the Remy in Guatemala and the fact-finding mission?
For example, yes.
Yeah. So in the Remy report, it's that what's interesting about that is that they took just open narratives from people. And I don't really like using that word, but I know it's the academic way to say what people wanted to say. So the church members would go and talk to Mayan people and say, whatever you want to say about what happened, you can say it. So you would find a common theme, right? Like there was an agenda by the Guatemalan government to perpetuate propaganda that the Mayans were some type of subversive group that was going to destabilize them, et cetera, et cetera. So with the fact-finding mission report, I think where it falls short again is because of the dates. you know, they have a very narrow frame and they'll look at some of the laws, but, you know, it's also a compromise between the parties that are writing this thing. So you will find the hate speech, obviously the role of Facebook and promoting that kind of stuff. And I think they do talk about propaganda, but it's so limited because really and truly, and just like in the Armenian situation, I think if you look at what happens under the Sultan, that really then carries over into the Young Turks, and probably before, you know, in the late 1800s, there's probably something before that that probably needs to be looked at. But in the Rohingya case, the propaganda that comes out is right at the end of British colonialism. And everything that happens during that colonial time period is used against the Rohingya to then classify them as foreigners. So I don't think the fact-finding mission report, in my opinion, even covers that. It doesn't touch it. But a lot of the reports do it, but I think everything, as you know, it's always done in a roundabout way because they're trying to address the elements of the crime, and people don't think it has anything to do with anything, but it does really, when we're investigating it. So yeah.
Thanks a lot.
I have a question also to Carola, and I just recall that, for example, in Stalinist times, and Professor Perumian maybe will help us to maybe to confirm or reject my just thought, my notion on that. The most dangerous thing in Stalinist time, the thing from the dehumanization perspective, was that the enemies of people, враги народа, was very loosely defined, and you could not understand if you are in this category of the enemy of people or not. And I think if we have a strict definition, of course it's dangerous too, but in the case when we have this vagueness of the dehumanism, of the labeling, it's even more dangerous, more virulent maybe. What do you think? It's just a thought that just came.
To be honest, I know very, very little about the Stalinist times, and I don't really feel competent.
Not only about Stalinist time, but for example, when they said that Jews were part of conspiracy, and nobody knew what this conspiracy about. Not just saying, yes, they are cockroaches, they are rats. It's very specific. It's very concrete examples of dehumanization. But then they said that, you know, this group of people, they do something in secrecy, or they are in some conspiracy. I think it's also very, very dangerous from the perspective of dehumanization.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see a similar combination also during the Holocaust, where strange combinations were made of the Jews being of a different race, and at the same time being communists, and at the same time trying to take over world leadership, all in the propaganda of the Nazis, which seemed to make sense for them. But if you look at it retrospectively, it really doesn't connect. But of course, you add up more and more elements to make the enemy, to create this figure of an enemy.
Okay.
May I
Professor
jump in? In the Stalinist regime, I would put the enemy of the people in the category of, rather than the dehumanization, Gregory Stanton's 10 stages of genocide, I could put it in the stigmatization or polarization. By stigmatization of the people, the enemy of the people, they were categorizing these people and persecuting them, purging them. And by polarizing, naming them as the enemy of the people, they were destructing families. Even sons were the sons were denying their fathers or mothers as enemies of the people. So yeah, this was a term that was used in the Stalinist era.
Yes.
It was a very powerful tool for the purges that went on.
Yes, they, if I'm not mistaken, they even had a camp for wives of the enemies of regime in Altai.
Yes.
Altai lager for something like. Okay. Any
Yes,
questions?
that's right.
Any thoughts? Any ideas for discussion? If not, it was fantastic panel. Thank you very much for all these presentations. I had some questions in my list, but we are working already 2 hours. And thank you very much for your attendance. As Dr. Pirumian mentioned, unfortunately, it's not very good time for Armenia. I informed my students, but you know, they are coming to my classes after their volunteering works. They try to be involved in this war-related matters. Many of my students are drafted to army, and unfortunately, we even had some students killed in front line, and that's why I understand that it's not the best time for this conference, but I think that we should also struggle against genocide, against violence via education, their learning, via teaching. And as I said, this panel is recorded, has been recorded, and we are going to put it in our YouTube page, and this panel will be will have more people will have chance to listen your presentations and our discussion. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your work, and have a good day. Be healthy. It's another thing. It's another warning for nowadays world. And see you then.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.